Jacobs to advise us on how to implement culture change effectively. Jake has consulted 210,000 people or more in 61 industries. In this scheduled session, we will examine pain points and identify solutions. And with that, Jake, I'm going to give the mic over to you. I know we've got a jam-packed 90 minutes, so let's not waste any time and let's get rolling.
Great. Thanks so much, Craig. So welcome to everybody. What I'd like to do is start with sharing my screen so that we can, and here we go. It says it cannot share my screen. Lori. Lori,
you're on mute.
Yeah, I was going to say, I gave you access. Do you want to send me the presentation and I'll share it?
Yeah, I sent it to you. I'll send it again.
Okay.
And while that's happening, what I will do is start with one thing. Sorry about this, folks. We're gonna get this taken care of straight away. Okay, let me start with what I call my origin story, which is how did I get into this field and why do I care about it? Because I know you all are working on culture change and you care about this field too. I was just an undergrad at the University of Michigan, and I had a project that I worked on at a place called the Institute for Social Research. And the Institute for Social Research had this project that they were looking at community mental health centers and seeing how effective they were in dealing with substance abuse treatment. So the role that I had in this project was that I would fly around from community mental health center to community mental health center. I did 6 or 8 of these. And I would take notes and write up case studies for each of these centers and their effectiveness with substance abuse. This was a great job. I was young. I got to go on planes. They gave me peanuts. This was a big deal, something that I wasn't used to. But there's one in particular that I remember to this day, and it's really responsible for why I got into this field in the first place. And I was in Buffalo, New York, and I was talking to the executive director. And I still remember that it was late afternoon. The blinds were open, and there were shadows coming into the room. And I said to the woman, I said, you know, what do you like best about your job? And she looked forward to me and she said, I'd like to tell you what I like the least about my job. And I said, what's that? And I, got my pen ready to take notes. And she said, see that group of people across the street? And I looked across the street and there were a group of people standing on a street corner. And I said, yeah, I see those people. And she said, that's where they go to get high before they come in for their sessions. I put my pen down and I decided that in that moment that I wasn't going to be able to do research, that I wasn't going to write up case studies and move on to the next one. And I was going to get my hands dirty working in real organizations with real people and hopefully making a real difference. So I go back to that story because it has everything to do with the work that I do today around engaging people in what I call creating their collective futures. And I think in culture work in particular, it's really critical to get that engagement, because if you can change your organization in the way that you want to become in the future, change happens faster and it's more sustainable. So I open with that story as a way for you to think about the rest of the presentation, which Lori, I've sent through, and hopefully you'll be able to pull up on the screen.
Yes. I am.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so, and you can put this on present to fill out the screen. This picture is behind me on the wall, if you can tell. It's a picture of a guy named Archimedes. I don't know how many of you have heard of Archimedes or his quote, because what he did is he described leverage by saying, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and single-handed, I shall move the world. And so what Archimedes figured out was the power of leverage, that in fact, with very little effort, you could move massive boulders and rocks, or in his case, he's describing the world. So what I'm going to cover with you today is about smart strategic actions that you can take that will have a profound impact on change work that you're doing in the organization. Next slide. So as Craig said, the title of this is 8 Ways to Achieve Faster, Easier, Better Change Results. And faster, easier, and better, normally you think you have to trade in. So if it's going to be faster, can it be easier and better? If it's going to be easier, is it going to be better and faster? This is something that gives you all of these for free. You get them by applying the levers that we're going to cover today. Next slide. So this is a picture, obviously, of me and 3 books that I've written. The bottom right is the first one, called Real-Time Strategic Change. The subtitle is How to Involve an Entire Organization in Fast and Far-Reaching Change. The one on the bottom left is titled You Don't Have to Do It Alone, and the subtitle is How to Involve Others to Get Things Done. And then Leverage Change, which is going to be our focus today, 8 Ways to Achieve Faster, Easier, Better Results. All 3 of these books have one thing in common, and it is about how do you engage people in making change happen? How do I go beyond the usual suspects? How do I get beyond leadership to an entire organization and invite them into a process of change that they'll want to accept, that they'll want to stay in, and that they'll want to get involved the next time you ask them? Next slide. So this is a picture of my buddy Theo. And one of the things that I did when I wrote the book is I went out in the afternoons. That's me holding a Frisbee and him trying to grab it. This is a half-mile long field near my house. And so one of the best places that I did my thinking was on this field. And my question to you to enter into the chat is, where are some of the best places that you do your thinking? And Lori, if you hit it, advance, it'll come up, I think, with one more piece on the screen. So what are yours? And if you could enter those into the chat, that would be great. I'd love to see them. Mohammed, the shower, it always gets a vote. The shower always gets a vote. What else? Right? On the walk, morning walk, walk with my dog. So a lot of activity, just like me, walk wherever I can have uninterrupted thought. Fishing. Good, Alex. I like that one. Car drives. So these are all places where we do some of the best thinking. And what I'm going to do is invite you to add this to your list of where you do your best thinking. We're going to have some things that I'm going to present to you and explain, and then other things where you'll have an opportunity to do some work on your own. Next slide, Lori. So here's my purpose. What I want to do is to talk about leverage change in a different way than you normally hear people describe approaches to change. I want to look at this as a good way to make what you're already doing better. So no matter what approach, what model, what method you're using right now, leverage change and what we cover today, you're going to be able to use to enhance the work that you're already doing. Next slide. So here are outcomes. If you hit it again, Lori, we'll see the first one, which is, I don't know whether you'll be jumping for joy like these people, but I want you to be excited to use this approach. I want you to be energized to be able to look out and say, I can make a difference with this, and I can make a difference right here and right now. So the next outcome, if you hit the button, Lori, and advance it, is I'd also like to have you surprised. And surprised in how easy this is to use. There are 8 levers. They all will make a profound difference toward faster, easier, better results. And so I'd like you surprised to say, wow, I can use this with something immediately. And that's going to be one of the measures we use for this session. Next. So organizations are facing more and more change. And if you hit it again, Lori, what we can see is there's lots of change going on. I mean, not only COVID, which has gotten a lot of airplay recently, but all kinds of change with technology, with ways that work are being done, with the culture that you're trying to create out in Colorado. So they're facing more and more change. There's no debate about this. In fact, I find that every generation, there's a new futurist who says we're going to experience more change in the next 10 years than we did in the previous 100. How many people have heard somebody say that? Right? So there's no debate. I'm not going to argue that point. But if you go to the next slide, clients come to us frustrated with 3 different issues. And what I would say is I've heard these from my clients. You advance one more time. One is it's too slow. So change is not fast enough and people are complaining about it. It's too hard. Now, this is an example of somebody who did not use a lever like Archimedes. So it's just too difficult. It's frustrating. There's resistance, all kinds of reasons why it's tough. And then too disappointing. So this is a little looking Winnie the Pooh with his head in the corner, but what he's saying is it's ineffective. And you could look around at all kinds of research that's done, and 3/4 of change efforts fail to meet the objectives they set out to achieve. And this has been looked at in a lot of different studies, a lot of different ways. So what I want you to do is add into the chat, what are some of the things that you've heard your clients complain about being frustrated when it comes time to making changes? Right. Craig, too much time. Right. A version of too slow. Right. Not having skills. I didn't understand it. It's slow to implementation. These are things that not only you hear, but I hear, right? We all hear going out there. And I think that people are well-intentioned, right? I think that they want change to work. The question is how to do it and how to do it well. If you go to the next slide, Lori, there are many models. So if you go to the next one beyond this and advance it, you'll see that there are a lot of models that people use. Any of you recognize any of these that are going up? And if you have another one that you use, add it into the chat right now. Anything to add there? So what I would say is we're not in trouble because we don't have models. I think we're in trouble because we don't know how to leverage those models. If you go to the next slide, Lori, what we can see is this question that I had when I sat down to write the book. How can we provide even more value to our clients than we already do? So with the best of efforts, we're doing what we can to make change happen. But the question is, what does even more value look like? And if you advance, Lori, to the next slide, I believe there is a way. And if you hit that advance again, not surprisingly, it's about leverage. It's about getting more done with less. And in a lot of organizations, those are dirty words. And by dirty words, I mean get more done with less means you get less resources, you get less money, you get less time, and you have more work. I'm going to reframe that and talk about a different getting more done with less, because I'm talking about more results with fewer hassles, headaches, and problems than you imagined possible. And that's what the levers do for you. If you go ahead, Lori, to the next slide, there's a lever description sheet. And this is a handout. Did people get this, Lori, ahead of time, or are we going to upload it into the chat now?
Into the chat. Cherie's going to load it for us.
Great. So on this lever description sheet, you can see, even at this high level, the left-hand column at the bottom talks about common problems, and the right hand are levers that I identified and developed that address these problems. So not only are things too slow and too hard and too disappointing, but there are other problems that I heard from clients. And so I took this from my consulting practice and I put together the levers that we're going to describe today in the session. Next slide, Lori. So there are 3 levers in particular that I'm going to spend time on today. And given the amount of time that we have, we can go into other levers that you're interested in, given the descriptions that you see on the handout. So one problem is there's too much change. People are overwhelmed and they have what my clients call change fatigue. Has anybody had that as something that you've experienced in your organization? Too much change? Right. And then change taking too long was the second one that I identified for today's session. And then there's another one where people reject the change approach you're taking because it's, quote, not invented here. So if you've ever tried to bring about change and people say, have you done this in a group my size? Have you done this in the function that I'm working in? Have you done it in our kind of organization? And they reject what you're trying to do before you even get started. So let's take a closer look at these 3 levers in particular. The way we're going to do this, that's all right, you can go to the next one, Lori, is we're going to do what I call a rapid response consultation. This is an opportunity for somebody in the crowd to get live consultation from me in front of everybody, and you get 2 minutes to brief us on your situation. It could be any kind of change at all, and then I'll have 5 minutes to consult to you to be able to apply the levers and help you achieve faster, easier, better results. So the way that I entice somebody to do this client briefing is that I will send you a free autographed copy of Leverage Change. And what I'll ask you to do is whoever types me into the chat first is our volunteer, and then have you at some point during the session send an address that I could mail this book to Lori, so I've got that and I'll make sure I get it sent out to you. So it's time for some brave soul to type me into the chat. Nobody has any change issues that they're dealing with right now?
Slow typers.
Craig Herder. Craig Herder.
Craig, yay!
Craig, volunteer, excellent. A brave soul. So what we're going to do, Craig, is we're going to go to the next slide. When we go to the next slide, it's going to start counting down. Tell us anything about your situation that you think will be helpful, who's involved, what you're trying to accomplish, anything you think that will be helpful to us.
No problem. So really what I'm looking at is really this change effort that's underway right now, Jake, is one of the challenges we're facing is we have a group of people that are change agents that we're trying to bring in and have them be part of our conversation. We've been having meetings, we've brought Lori on board, we've brought Sri on board, we've got great work that we've done together as a group. But the challenge is that we're not having great attendance to the meetings, and we're not having people participate at the level that we would like for them to participate at. So the challenge for me is, how do I encourage people to be a part of the group, to contribute to the level that they agreed to contribute, and to prioritize the work that they need to do that's part of being a change agent for this work effort that we're doing. So really interested in finding the best way to get results out of this team.
Great. Anything else you want to add?
These are all great people. These are all very busy people. These are all people that have got a lot on their plates, and oftentimes it's a scheduling conflict that gets in the way of us being able to meet together as a group. So those are the challenges that I think people are facing.
Great. Okay. So when this goes, you can go to the next slide, Lori. And what the next slide does, Craig, is it explains what my requested rules of engagement are for the rapid response consultation. So first of all, we'll have 5 minutes, and when we go to the next slide, it'll count down. What I'm going to ask is your permission. Go back. I'm not done with the rules yet, Lori. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
So interruptions being okay. And I know this isn't proper manners, but since I only have 5 minutes and I'm going to be asking questions and making suggestions to you, I'm going to ask if it's okay that I make interruptions as you're speaking. And then everybody else, I would like to take notes. Take notes and hold questions. Well, what kind of questions am I asking? What kind of responses is Craig giving? What leads to faster, easier, better results? And the goal that Craig and I have is one idea, one breakthrough idea, at least, that's going to lead to faster, easier, better results. So, Craig, are we clear what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to do it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, go to the next slide, Lori. Let the 5 minutes commence. So first off, Craig, how did people get selected or volunteer for this role?
We had an all staff meeting, and we had people volunteer to be part of the change management group. Some people were assigned by the directors, but most people were volunteers.
Okay. And did people who did this work, do they have experience in this work, or is this new work for them?
This is all new work for them.
Great. And what kind of development have they had so far in being able to do this work well?
We haven't really invested in development, Jake. We really just, it's been a volunteer effort for the team members, and that's a really good question. We haven't considered equipping people and what that would look like.
So just one idea to put away right now is there may be a basic course that you make available to people, and then they may also, Craig, have a hotline that they could call. Whether that's with Sri and Lori or with you, but if they get into a situation, can they call somebody for help in that particular situation that can help them manage their way through it and move forward with some people who have more experience? The other thing that you could do is you could have some kind of place, whether it's on the web or maybe their regular meetings, although meeting attendance is an issue, where people can post successes and frustrations. And so when things are working, let's get that identified so we can share best practices. And when people have frustrations, I may be able to look at it and say, you know what, I've got an idea that may be able to help you. Third idea is maybe you get a buddy structure and you get people who are paired up, or trios, right, that work together. And so they meet every so often, maybe once a month, twice a month, and be able to share what they're learning. Again, all of this is about building a common database, learning from each other. Now, another question that I have is, does it clear to you what it looks like when people are doing a good job of what needs to be done in this situation?
I think I have a good idea of what that looks like. If I can get into that, it's participation, it's carrying the content of the meetings to their teams and bringing back information from their teams back to the meeting so we can action on that and have work to do for the team.
Great. So now I'm going to put a mirror up for you and say, what does it look like for you in your role when they're living in that world, when they're doing work that way? What is it that you're doing that's making a difference?
That's really good. I think that what I'm doing is I'm facilitating conversation. I'm enabling people to bring their best self to the conversation, and I'm really a facilitation is probably the best way to put it. I'm just there to kind of help organize and bring strategies for what we're doing.
Great. What could you be doing tomorrow or Monday that would help facilitate conversation in this group if you were to try and make it happen on some small scale, but make it happen in the next day or two?
I could use your trios analogy and start reaching out to people and start engaging them.
Great. So that's one idea I also want you to put away as something that you can go do and make a difference on immediately. One of the things that I'm curious about is when people are bringing about change, is there a way for them to build a roadmap, to put down what they're doing step by step and actually come up with what work are they doing and how are they doing that work so that they can document it? And when they document it, then it can be shared more easily and people could assess it. You could even have a special analysis day. Let's look at the ways that we're approaching this work and what difference is it making? When's it working? When's it not working? Why and why not? Does that make any sense?
That does make sense. And we've been trying to facilitate that in the meetings, and with low attendance, that's not been very successful. So I think we need to find another vehicle to accomplish that.
Right. So maybe what happens is you stop having meetings. One of the things you do is you let people work, but they work out in the world on the problems they're having instead of trying to bring them into this world of breakouts.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you, Jake.
So let's go to the next slide. Thank you very much, Craig. And Craig, you have a book yet or not?
I do have a copy of the book.
All right. You get to gift the book that I'm going to send to you to the person that you think would love it the most. Not that needs it the most, not that needs it the most, although you might want to give it to that person, but the person who would love it the most. And Lori, if you can get me Craig's address, I'll take care of that. Let's do a reflection now. Who saw some of these levers applied and what impact did they have? So Craig, let's start with you and say, how did that session go for you? What worked, what didn't, what happened for you as we did our consultation?
I liked the coaching style that you took to kind of ask good questions and make me think. And as you were asking your questions, light bulbs were going off in my head. So that was very helpful.
Great. How about other people in terms of what occurred to you that you noticed? And you can either type it in the chat or you could just unmute yourself and shout out loud so that we can hear you. Self-reflection on the organizer. Right. So Jose, can you say more about that?
Yeah, pretty much just getting the buy-in ownership from the organizer, the facilitator of the project to reflect on what they're doing and what kind of participation they're taking for as part of the project itself. So yeah.
Yeah, really helpful for Craig when I said, hey, let's bring a mirror up and say, what could you do? And he had some ideas, right? Top of mind, he had some ideas. So it's not just about other people, but also what are we doing? How about another couple ideas from the crowd in terms of what you noticed?
I noticed something that Craig does that didn't get covered, and that is leading by example. The change we're trying to initiate is exemplified in his daily interactions.
Right. That's great, Daniel. And somebody just put up that you have a lot on your plates. And so this is like asking more. So one of the suggestions that I have for you, and it's one of the levers, with too much on your plate, there's a lever that's called make change work part of daily work. And by that, what I mean is start in your everyday work looking for opportunities to support this culture change, large or small. So if you want a more participative organization, invite a few people who normally wouldn't get invitations to a meeting to your next meeting. Or if you're facilitating something and you say, we want more input from people, pause, go around the table, ask for what people are thinking. These small things that you're doing can make a big difference by living your future now, right? So think about what is it that I can do that will start to model this change, just like Craig is modeling this change for you. What can you do to model for others? And that doesn't take any more time. It doesn't take any more work. It's something that you can do that will make a difference. Let's go to the next slide, Lori. So let's learn about some of these levers. Go to the next slide if you can. Right. Make change work part of daily work. So what we did is we asked for input from you on the levers that you wanted to look at. And making change work part of daily work, let me tell you a story about this one. And if you go to the next slide, we can go along with it. So this is dealing with too much on your plate. Now, this piece of pie fits perfectly on this plate, but most of your work is falling off the sides. So too much on your plate. I had an executive team that I was working with. This is an example. So the executive team wanted to work on feedback that they were giving each other. And you could have an offsite for this. You could have a special training session for this. But what the executive leader, the CEO of this organization said was, let's make it part of daily work. So in their staff meetings on a weekly basis, they built in 15 minutes at the end of the sessions. And in that 15 minutes, they rotated around the room so that each person got on what they called the hot seat. And what happened on the hot seat was, first, a strength bombardment. So what are all the things that this person's doing that's really helpful to the team? And we made them write down the feedback, right? Because a lot of times when you get positive feedback, you go, that was nothing, that was easy. You explain it away. So write down that feedback. And then what are the things that this person needs to focus on improving? And have them write that down. It only took 15 minutes. As was at the end of the meeting. They didn't have an offsite. It didn't add to their workload, right? Because they were already in that staff meeting on a weekly basis. So look for opportunities to be able to make change work part of daily work. Let's go to the next slide, which is about pausing for ideas that this gives you or inquiries or questions that you have about it. And again, you can type these into the chat or you can just unmute and shout them out. So what ideas or questions do you have based on making change work part of daily work? No input needed?
Could you phrase that question one more time?
Yeah. What ideas does this lever of make change work part of daily work, what ideas does that give you, Daniel? Or are there questions you have about how you might go about applying it? Live the change by example. Trace, do you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you. I just was going to say one thing that I think that has would be helpful is a set of defined objective goals. and then we could have actionable tasks that we could then assign out. So if we know, okay, I'm trying to achieve this, then I can apply that to my daily routine and say, let me schedule 15 or 20 minutes to allocate to, to work on this particular deliverable, etc. So I know that that's always very helpful. And I know it's also one of the difficult things to come to, especially when it's a fully voluntary, fully do it on your own time, kind of a setup. There's a lot of goodwill, but not a lot of great time availability. So and I like your idea of saying, okay, rather than meeting because we're all busy, here's a set of actions. Who's going to take what? Let's regroup in a couple of weeks, and we'll all review what everyone has worked on in shared documents, for example.
Yeah, in fact, that was the idea, Trace, that I was going to suggest to Craig was maybe you open a Google Doc and you say, question one is, what does better look like? What does it look like when we're really supporting and facilitating this culture change? And let people answer that question, and then take that and build it into goals. So what are the results that these are speaking to? What categories make sense around the input that we've gotten? And then you could put those goals up and say, all right, now let's have people brainstorm all the activities and actions that you could take that would help us achieve those goals. None of this requires a meeting. We're never going to come together, right? But as individuals, when you have time, you go on. This doesn't take long. And then out of those ideas, pick one or two as an individual and be able to write up, maybe in a form, Google form, to say, hey, it's Jake Jacobs, and here are the two things that I'm working on. So you'd have a spreadsheet of all the actions that people are taking, and you could check in on them even individually. So it may not be that it's easiest to bring this group together. It may be easiest for this group to go out as free agents and be working in the organization, right? So one of the things I like to do is put constraints on clients, right? So what it leads to is innovation and creativity. What would happen in this group, right, if you could never have another meeting? How would you do business? How would you communicate? How would you get aligned around things? This Google Doc idea that I'm sharing is one of the ways to do that. Let's go to the next slide, Lori. Find opportunities for people to make a meaningful difference. So this one fits in terms of when people only have their day job to do. See, I believe that people want to make a meaningful difference, that they want to step up and they want to stand out and they want to contribute. So what this is about reaching out and drawing circles that include people in the work you're doing. Assume that they're going to be interested. Find things that people want to do, and then support them in doing that. So let's go to the next slide. So this slide is meant to say, reach out and touch someone, right? Find ways for people to get involved. And you may say, I don't know how to do that. People don't want to get involved. They don't, what I would suggest, ask them. Tell them what you're trying to accomplish, get these goals, get these actions, and then ask, how could you help me get this done? And my experience has been people generally want to be helpful. So if you can come up with what it is you're trying to accomplish, you could say, in fact, Craig, we can use your example. If you're trying to get people aligned around this work, you could go reach out to 5 people who are in this group and ask them for ideas about how to gain greater alignment and activity out of this group, and then take those ideas and test them. Try them out, see how they work, what works, what doesn't, what works, carry forward, what doesn't, make some course corrections. But this whole idea of engagement, I think, is very powerful in terms of a lever, and finding opportunities for people to make a meaningful difference is one of the best levers to use that really will tap into each person's area of expertise, because we only want to contribute when we feel good, smart, and capable in terms of contributing. Daniel, you've got a hand up.
If I may ask a question, Jake, do you find that people step up to the plate to help a initiative more in a group setting or a one-on-one setting?
I actually, in this book, you don't have to do it alone. What we did is we wrote a chapter on invitations. And so I'm a big believer that the invitations need to be personal. If you send out a blanket email to all kinds of people saying, look, could you sign up? It doesn't touch people. It doesn't touch their heart, their soul, their being, right? It's not special. But if I find out that Daniel's really good at doing something, and I go ask Daniel for help in that particular arena, and when I go ask for help, I say, Daniel, you know, I'm asking for you to help on this because I've seen you do this in these other situations. And that's really been powerful for the organization. So I'm going to ask you specially if you can step up and help me in this particular way. The other way to ask for help is to say, you know what? I'm swamped. I don't know where to go with this. Can you help me think through a good way forward? And if there are ways that you can support me in doing that, I would really appreciate it. So a lot of times people just need to be asked in the right way. And that is a personal invitation that makes the biggest difference. And that's been my experience, Daniel. And that's what we wrote up in that book. Does that answer it for you?
Jake, those are really good tools. And
Great.
I'm glad that this is being recorded. Thank you.
Good. Anybody else? Let's go to the next slide because it's a question and idea slide. Are there other questions that people have about how they would take this lever of meaningful differences, meaningful contributions, and find opportunities for people? Anything? All right, let's go ahead, Lori, to the next slide. Think and act as if the future were now. This is, I think, one of the most powerful levers that I came up with. And if you go to the next slide, Lori, I'll show you where it came from. This is a guy named Stan Davis. And not to date myself, but this book was written in the mid-1980s. I was getting my master's degree and I was doing research. And he wrote a book called Future Perfect. And for anybody who's heard of Tom Peters, who wrote In Search of Excellence, he said it's the book of the decade, which is quite a declaration. What was special that I found that Stan Davis said in this book was that we need to lead and manage from the future perfect tense of the verb. The future perfect tense of the verb is as if something had already happened, right? So what you do, and you go to the next slide, Lori, is you'll see as you advance it, typically what we do is we live in the present and then it advances, and the future is something that we wait to unfold before us. We wait for it to occur at a later point in time, and therefore we wait. So if you're trying to accelerate the pace of change, make things happen faster, what I'm going to suggest is you go in the opposite direction. So if you advance the slide again, Lori, you go from the future to the next advance back to the present. And so how do you do this? You get some picture of what you want the future to look like. When I asked Craig, what would he be doing in the future? And he said he would be facilitating people. And I said, well, how could you start doing that facilitation? Immediately, right here and right now. And the story that I have that goes along with this one was a client that had an executive team that was meeting, and they spent all morning trying to figure out how to increase sales in a particular region of the organization. And they came up with two ideas. They weren't sure which one to go with. And at lunch, I said to them, you said that you wanted this to be a more participative organization. And they said, yeah, that's part of the culture change work we're doing. I said, how could you make this a more participative organization in dealing with this issue? And they said, well, I mean, we could invite more people into the conversation. So we could have the people who are salespeople in this region. We could have people from other regions come in and talk about what they've done to increase sales. And they started to list these people. And then they said, you know, we should have them at next week's meeting. And I said, you know what? If we're serious about making our future happen faster, let's invite them this afternoon. And they said, well, not everybody's in the office. And I said, yes, I know. Do you have Google? Do you have phones? Are there ways that we could get these people's voices in the room? And for people who are in the office, invite them in, have them join the meeting. And they doubled the number of people that were participating in the afternoon. And the interesting thing was they came up with a third solution. And the third solution was one that was not one of the first two they came up in the morning. It was a whole new idea. And I am proud to say that they implemented that idea. And within 3 months, they found that the sales in this problem region started to increase. So this idea about think and act as if the future were now, you don't have to have it all figured out. Any aspect of the future that you can get clear about and say, you know, this is what it would look like if we were living in our preferred future, and put that into place immediately, right here and right now, in any way that you can, it will start to accelerate change. And the benefit of it is what I call increasing the believability index. The believability index is an individual's belief that change is for real this time. And so if you get more people thinking and acting as if the future were now, you'll have more changes taking place in your organization. And by having these changes take place in your organization, when people look to the left and right, they'll see other people making changes. So it becomes what I call a virtuous cycle. You get encouraged because you see that other people are doing it, and you say, well, why can't I? So if you can start making changes and make it visible to other people, they will start making changes as well. And what you'll find, like a snowball rolling downhill, it will get bigger and faster and more powerful as time evolves. So let's go to the next slide on this one, Lori, and see if there are any ideas, questions that people have about this particular lever.
Jake, I like to say something because this change agent group has actually done some of what you just mentioned as far as living like tomorrow is today, basically.
Yep.
We came up with 5 themes: team collaboration, planning and transparency, knowledge management, management expectations, and pay and benefits. And we prioritized those. And we actually started to focus on team collaboration and planning and transparency, and came up with the desired state for that. So they kind of went through the exercise of, this is what the current state is, this is what the desired state is. And I think one of the things that we can do based on your recommendation is to expedite what we're doing, because we're breaking out and focusing on team collaboration now. But we have what we need for the desired state. Instead of waiting and doing that in a slower way, we can actually action that quicker. So I really like that.
Totally true, Lori. Totally true. And the more that you do it, in the more situations and the more people, the faster that wheel's going to turn, and the more momentum that you're going to build. So finding ways, even on your own, this doesn't take extra time. It doesn't take extra meetings. You just look and say, if I were the best change agent I could be, how would I be behaving now? What decisions would I make? What actions would I take? Who would I be talking to? What would the conversation be about? And then start that immediately. Go find that person, go have that conversation, and you will become that better version of a change agent that you're envisioning. Any other ideas or questions about this particular lever? All right, let's move on. Start with impact, follow the energy. This is the fourth and last one. And what this means is that you don't have to start at the top of the organization and work your way down in a cascading fashion. That's a choice. But what I found is that you look for where there's impact, and where there's impact, there's opportunities. So I had a client once, CEO was not on board, wasn't involved. There were some business unit managers that had this idea. They just laid off 1,000 people in a 10,000 person organization. So this was huge layoffs. And what they said was, we want to have a problem solving meeting to see if we can improve our performance and avoid the next round of layoffs. And I said, well, how long do you want this meeting to be? And they said, half a day. So I said to them, I said, I don't think in a half a day of a problem solving meeting, you're going to be able to get on top of this issue that 10% of your workforce just got laid off from. But I think it's a place to start. So we had that meeting, and instead of 80 people coming to it, they invited 300. And instead of a half day, they made it a whole day. And at the end of this day, the CEO came in to thank them for their work, and we have him on video going, that's wow. And he was impressed by how much work the 300 had accomplished. Well, what this led to were 2 other larger events of 500 people, 800 people, getting clear on what the values were for the organization, and then how could they live those values on a daily basis in policies and procedures and processes. This became a 2-year change effort. It got written up in Business Week and Fortune. And it started with where there were opportunities for impact. And then we followed the energy. We followed where there were possibilities, where there's a mentor of mine, Meg Wheatley, who says, where does the work want to happen? Where are there possibilities for people to say, yes, I want to get involved? Let's go to the next slide, Lori. So the question that I have for you to think about is, where is it that you could put a drop in that pond of water and get the reverberations, right? Where is the opportunity for you to have that half-day meeting with 80 people doing problem solving, which on its own is not going to make the difference on its own. But what it'll do is it'll open the door of possibilities to other work that can be done in the organization. So if you're looking and you're saying, you know, we don't quite have the top of the house on board, I'm going to say, that's okay. There are a lot of projects that I've started where the top of the house was not on board, but you start where somebody says, I'm ready. And where they're ready, if you're ready, you can make progress. So let's go to the next slide, Lori. So how about for this one? Any ideas or questions that you have about this one before I turn you loose to do some work yourselves? All right, roll up your sleeves. Let's go to the next slide.
1 minute here.
Okay, so this is where this lever change sheet's going to come in handy. You know the ones that we've covered, the 4 that we covered. What I'd like you to do is go to the next slide, and here's the request. There's 4 levers to choose from. So you choose one of them. Make change work part of daily work. Find opportunities for people to make a meaningful difference. Think and act as if the future were now, and start with impact, follow the energy. Choose one of these levers that you're intrigued by, that you think has got some possibility for you to be able to apply this afternoon. Go to the next slide, Lori, and what we're going to do is Lori's going to send you to breakouts in pairs. And we're going to each get a chance to be the client. So first, choose your first client and identify a live change situation, something that you're working on. And choose the lever to apply, and then describe these to your partner. What's the situation? Who's involved? Just like what Craig did with me. And then brainstorm together ways to apply the lever, right? Choose one of those to implement as the client. Choose one to implement. And then we're going to switch roles. And the person who is the consultant helping is going to become the client. And when you're the client, again, what's your change situation? What's your lever? Describe them, and then come up with a brainstorm and choose one that you're going to take action on starting now.
Yeah, they couldn't see it.
We're all back. So my question to the group is, how did that go? What insights did you get? What issues did you bump up against? Are there questions that you have for me? What happened in the breakout rooms?
I didn't have access to, it seems like I lost access to the spreadsheet that was shared out to us.
Jose, can you say that again? I couldn't quite hear.
Yeah, we were looking for access to that spreadsheet there. But after talking with the guys, we were able to come to a consensus of what we were going with it.
So you came up with some ideas that you could actually use.
Yes, sir.
Great. Any particular questions that were helpful for you, Jose, in terms of what people asked that led to some insight?
You're muted, Jose.
Yeah, I think we were having Kawami speak for our group, our breakout session. If he wants to go ahead and speak on that.
Sure. So I think one of the questions that we discussed was the first, in order to effect change, there has to be a culture that we're trying to change. So our question is, when we talk about change, what are we trying to change?
That's a great question. And I think, Kwame, that having that be a live conversation in the organization. So what is it that we want to change? Well, then you can try some things out. You can do what I call rapid prototyping. So somebody says, well, I want to change X. I want to change how our meetings are run. Then you can try that in the next meeting and see, how did that go, right? And learn from that. There's a colleague of mine who said the most successful organizations are the ones that fail the fastest. And learn from those failures and improve going forward. So taking an idea without perfecting it and saying, oh, okay, that's an idea. Let's try that one out. And then let's try another one out. Try another one out. So as you start this, you actually change the culture to becoming a learning organization. It becomes okay to try things and have them work or not work, because you continue to try things, and that becomes continuous improvement. So you can change the culture, just an individual coming up with new ideas or your group coming up with new ideas to be able to test in the real world. Does that make sense, Kwame?
Yes, it does. Our follow-up, I think Trace probably hit that in a different way. I think I'll let Ed go first. He has a question, and then I'll maybe he might have some contribution to this.
Great. Okay, Ed, you're up.
Oh, so I just met with Sheree. It was just both of us after we got the slides working. So what we found in our discussion is that us dealing both with different issues is to identify what the problems are, right? So understanding what the problems are, because we all have different pain points. So hers was that they needed to present something, but the subject matter expert left and didn't share the knowledge. So one problem there is knowledge transfer. So how do we, within the organization, share our knowledge amongst each other so that just not one person knows it? We should really be able to also, if one person's gone, the next person can step in, right? And take the battle. And then the one that I dealt with is that I'm working with a project that I just kind of stepped in. So it's part of that leadership of showing, okay, well, no one's taking ownership of everything. I'm going to step in, even though I'm not an expert on it, and just show you that even a little bit of guidance and showing leadership from one person will bring out the leadership in other people.
Boy, that's true.
So that's the way we're dealing with our issues, and we kind of talk through that. So that's what we came up with.
Yeah, actually, in the group, I got joined into a breakout room. Thank you, Lori. So I found myself into a breakout room, and what we talked about in there was, if you have some issues, how can you raise those issues in a way that's helpful, right? And that's an act of leadership, right? Being able to stand up and say, hey, here's an opportunity. I'd like to help solve this. Can you help me? Is an act of leadership as well. So part of your change agentry of being in this group can also flow into your day job. So I think that's a really good point, Ed, that you made. Mohammed's got a hand up.
Just because we want to get the most out of this session, and Jake, really, this is a great opportunity. I appreciate it, and Craig, thank you for making this happen. Have we looked into what do we have as a desired state for the change that we're looking for, even if not the strategic, at least the next 6 months? What are the things that we are trying to change, the behavior or what have you? And Jake, do you have any template that we can use, or document that help us, create that roadmap to achieve those objectives?
Yeah. So let me check first with Craig. Craig, is there any picture that exists of what the change looks like when it's successful?
Right now, we've successfully created norms. We've created meeting norms. We've created all of those components. Right now, we're working on some of the components around how we work together as a team and how we present ourselves to the rest of the organization. So these are items that will be relevant based on the conversations that have been happening within the change agent team. So without breaking out into an entire discussion around that, Lori, you've been managing those slides. What are the two primary things that we're working on over the next 2 months?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I can send the update for that to you. But we were focusing on team collaboration, and we went through the process of looking at the desired state on that, and we came up with an action plan for it. And now we're going through the process of looking at the planning and transparency, everything that we mapped out for the desired state on that. And we're going to put together an action plan for that. So we have ironically enough, we've been following the right methodology. We just need more people to help. So I could send everyone the status of where we are and the action plans that we came up with. So you can see the other three as well, which were knowledge management, management expectations, and pay and benefits. And that may help.
So one thing is there's a lever called create a common database. And it's when people don't know enough to make good decisions. So one thing I agree with Lori is sending that out and making it available. And then I think being able to put that up in a Google Doc and have people contribute to it freely of their own time and when it works for them. And then having somebody go through all that data and sort it into some meaningful categories, so that people know what the aim is, right? What's the target, and how do we know that we've hit the target, I think would be really important. So having that vision, and the clearer the vision is, the easier it is to achieve. So being able to get that out and have it on a Google Doc, and then being able to sort it, I think, Lori, might be really helpful for people. And Mohammed, one of the things that I've done that's a really simple tool is the know, be, do framework. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but knowing is what knowledge do people need to have? So what is it that people know in this future that says the culture change has been successful. Do is around actions. So what actions can you see people taking as part of this successful organization in the future? And then B are things about identity, that they're honest, that they're trustworthy, that they're responsible, that they're accountable. These are kind of personal identity attributes. And I've used this with organizations where we put a know, be, and do in 3 columns, and then people just fill those in. So again, without having a meeting, it might be something that you could send out and have people fill in so that you can get clearer about what the vision looks like and make it easier, Mohammed, to be able to then go about how do I achieve it. Does that help, Mohammed?
Much. This is very insightful. So it helped us to carry the conversation internally. Thank you.
Great. And help me with your pronunciation, Nyasha.
Very good.
Very good. You
I got
did.
it. Okay, you're up.
You're right. So this question is probably directed more so towards Craig, Sri, and Lori. One of the things, my apprehensive of getting involved is just being on a committee, a separate committee with each of you and the work that is, involved in that area. I'm wondering if there is an opportunity for collaboration in some of the efforts that you have. And that's probably something to think about. How could we collaborate so that we're doing that simultaneously?
That's a great idea, because as we looked at the 2 areas that we focused on, the team collaboration and planning and transparency, there was quite a bit of overlap. And we started going down the path of having different people work on everything. But that's a great insight to kind of take a closer look at what we can collaborate on and get more done quicker. And that actually leads us to making the future happen today, which I really like. So thanks so much for that.
Yeah, I was kind of confused. I had to reach out to Sri to make sure I was in the right area. But yeah, just a thought.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that I send everyone all of the work that we've done so you could see. And it's starting with your great work of organizing all the themes. And we started progressing through addressing each one of them. But instead of having a meeting for every single thing, because no one has time, we can creatively collaborate, either the Google Doc or a Jam board or anything like that. But we got to make some things just be available online for us to get these things done.
Yeah, I think that making it online would make a huge difference, because that's part of the make change work part of daily work. It doesn't feel like it's a whole nother meeting that I've got to schedule and make and the rest of it. We probably have time for a couple more thoughts or comments or questions. Anything out there that people haven't had a chance to say? Daniel.
It's hard to believe that I don't have anything to say, so I'm going to say on my breakout session was with Nyasha, whose name I mispronounced the first time, so you did well, Jake, and Jim Carlin, and a couple of big takeaways. First of all is about your lever living in the take on and living in the future and taking on the approach. You know what, we are OIT, and that we're going to succeed and fail or fail together, and preferably on the succeed portion. But the best thing that we took away from this short breakout session is that we now have a team of 3 that we're going to continue meeting regularly and
nice.
Continue these discussions.
That's great. That's really helpful. What else? Last call. Do we have one more comment or thought? All right, let me turn it over, Lori, to next steps, and then Craig, you can close the session for us.
Yes, thanks. And I apologize to those who had problems with the handout. I'll make sure that everyone has access. So I'll be sending out the slide deck and the handout, and also the ebook. And then I'm glad that you started the dialogue, and we can check in with you to see how things are going. So thanks so much for participating.
So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to participate in this. And thank you so much, Jake, for taking time out of your schedule to be here with us and help us understand change and put it in a different language for ourselves. I really appreciate you helping us frame it differently. For those of you that were part of this session, we have another session scheduled for later down the road. And Lori, if you could help make sure that everybody that was part of the session gets invited into that follow-on session so that we can re-meet with Jake and talk about what we've learned and what we've implemented in the last number of weeks. So please be looking for that invite. And as we go forward, but let's take this work, let's apply this work. Let's think about the 4 levers we learned about today. Let's think about all the work that we can do it and how we can apply it in our daily lives. So please be looking for opportunities to use this work. Jake, thanks again for taking the time to be with us, and thank you everybody for your time.
Thanks again, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
90
you.
minutes went quickly.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.